Working now? Yeah. We're just going to get another couple of minutes to allow people to make their way into the second group, because we've obviously got a great turnout tonight, which is fantastic, but we don't want people coming in here and disrupting things. So give it a couple of minutes for people to make their way next to a final seat, and then we'll get going.
Thanks.
Okay, brothers, sisters, friends and comrades, good evening.
Yay!
My name is Shelley. Yes, good evening. My name is Shelley. I'm co-chair of the Stockport Coalition and I'll be your chair for this evening's rally. Thank you very much for coming. I wish I could say that it's a pleasure to see so many people in the room, but I know that we're not pleased to be here. We're angry to be here. We're incensed, and we all want to be doing whatever it is we can to pile pressure on those with the power to end the violence and do what we know the majority of people in this country want, to call for a ceasefire. As many have said in recent weeks, this didn't start on October the 7th. We marked the 75th anniversary of the Nakba in May this year with a demonstration on the streets calling for the Palestinians' right to exist, resist and return. And we took to the streets again in July following Israel's brutal attack on the Jenin refugee camp. And many in this room have been active on this issue for many years, because we know that the root of the violence is the ongoing war on the Palestinian people, the occupation, subjugation, and what we are now seeing carried out as a genocide. And it is those in our government, the British government, with no official opposition to be seen, and its allies in the USA who have made and who continue to make that genocide possible. Not just with the political will, but with the weapons. The first demonstration that I ever attended was in 2009. I came to London as a teenager and joined the march against Israel's assault on Gaza. And it was, at the time, the biggest mobilisation in this country for Palestine. Stop the War at the time said 100,000 people took to the streets. But in the last month, we have exceeded those numbers, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and we will do it again this Saturday.
Yes!
And we have to do it again. Our opposition has to be bigger, our demonstration has to be bigger, because the slaughtering of Palestinians is far, far larger now. In the space of just 1 month, Israel has killed nearly 10 times the number of Palestinians as they did in 2009. And to put things further into perspective, more Palestinians have been killed by Israel in 1 month in Gaza than the number of civilians who have died in the war in Ukraine in 25 months since Russia's invasion. That is the scale of the slaughter that our elected representatives support, and so the scale of our opposition, our demonstrations, our disruption and resistance has to be big. And don't think that it doesn't make a difference, because if it didn't make a difference, they wouldn't be trying no amount of suppression can silence the freedom cries of Palestinians the world over. And then they tried to stop us marching. In what has been a pretty wild week for us meeting with the Met, let alone for the Home Secretary suffering a humiliating face down over the so-called hate march. But despite Suella's sniping, march we will.
Yay!
We are joined tonight by a number of speakers who will help give us some clarity on why we march, strike, boycott and dissent to bring about the end of this catastrophe and to drive forward freedom for the Palestinian people. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, one of Britain's leading voices for peace and the General Secretary of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, National Officer of the Stop the War Coalition. Please welcome Kate Hudson.
The second Nakba is taking place as we speak. Tens of thousands are being killed, war crimes committed, unbearable human tragedy is taking place. Hundreds of thousands here in Britain are marching, calling for a ceasefire, for a just peace for Palestine. And millions are marching around the world for the Palestinian cause. It's an unstoppable outpouring of humanity. I'm sure many of you also saw that video this afternoon of Somali kids demonstrating for the children of Palestine, and I'm sure it made many of us weep. Yet the killing continues and escalates, and the backing by the US, by the UK, continues in all its shame and disgrace for one reason alone. Israel is central to their project in the Middle East, to dominate the region, to advance their interests by war if necessary. Indeed, they are using the opportunity presented by the war on Gaza to strengthen their military position through arms, through warships, through veiled and not so veiled threats to Iran. Israel is their key ally, and they will support it to the bitter end, whatever the human cost. And that is the reason why our marches have come under such enormous and sustained attack from the establishment. We stand as part of a global movement, and we represent the overwhelming majority of the British population. Attempts to ban our march this weekend have nothing to do with Armistice Day. That was just a crude excuse for political repression that has succeeded only in winning countless more to our side. The real agenda has been exposed by Suella Braverman herself in a dangerous far-right move through her Times article, attempting to whip up far-right forces against our movement. Her lies about hate marches, her false accusations of anti-Semitism, her absurd accusations of police favouritism for the left.
If only.
This is all complete nonsense, but the agenda is clear. Support for the Israeli state, imperialism's number one ally, by any means necessary, even if that means untold death and destruction in Gaza, even if that means the trashing of our democratic rights here in Britain, and the criminalisation of whole swathes of society who will not go along with her creed of racism and hatred. The challenge for us is clear: to understand the dynamics at play here, to recognise that there is a split in the ruling class, as there was during the Iraq War, that we must work broadly with allies across the board. We must welcome new forces and forms of action and protest into the movement. After all, we represent humanity in all its diversity, and we must be united to face this challenge. There are many ways in which we oppose and challenge the crimes taking place and our government's role in it. And I want to highlight, Chair, just one, because today is a global day of action called by the Palestinian trade unions against the Israeli war machine. They have appealed to trade unionists internationally to stop the supply of weapons to Israel, and that is an appeal that we need to respond to. Globally, there have been some incredible responses, and I'm sure you've seen them on social media. At Oakland Port in the US, in Naples, and at Melbourne Port in Australia, and beyond. Here we've seen some powerful protests and blockages of factories by trade unionists, with more to come. But what we need is to move from protests outside the factories to actions by the workers within the factories and by those trade unionists who are hands-on with transporting the shipments. Now, no one thinks that's easy, but there are many opportunities, including in unionised sectors. Look at F-35 fighter jets, which are used in the bombardment of Gaza. 15% of those jets are made in Britain by BAE Systems. Its rear fuselage is made by BAE Systems at the Salisbury Aerodrome in Lancashire. This is the most important F-35 manufacturing site, and Unite is the main union there. Action has to be taken there. Unite members must take that up with their union. This is just the tip of the iceberg of arms production here in Britain, being made to kill Palestinians in Gaza. It's time for us to stop those weapons at their source. At the mass rally last Saturday, Andrew Murray said that we are not only all Palestinians on a Saturday afternoon at a demo, we are also all Palestinians at the ballot box, where we won't vote for any party that doesn't call for a ceasefire. Let us also all be Palestinians in our workplaces and in our union branches and in all we do every day to end this massacre, end this second Nakba, and secure the rights of Palestine, sovereign and free. Thank you.
Meeting room, so people on the panel are going to be moving in and out, so that's why we're going to keep disappearing and reappearing. Thank you, Kate. And Kate spoke very well there about the role that trade unions have to play in this fight, and there are a few trade unions who have been as active in supporting the cause of Palestinian struggle than our next speaker. She's a teacher who has led numerous delegations to Palestine to educate members of her union, the National Education Union, who we're very grateful to for hosting us tonight. She's chair of that union's international committee and a member of its executive, and she's a member of the national executive of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And she joins us tonight from Nottingham, so thank you very much for making the journey, Louise Regan.
Yay! Thank you everyone, it's a pleasure to welcome you into our building. We have, as has been said, a very long and proud history in our union of standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people since the 1980s. I'm very proud to belong to a union that has that long history. And as has been said, we take 2 delegations a year to meet with friends and partners out there to learn about the situation on the ground, but also so that our members are able to come back and talk about their experiences and think about how they discuss the situation in schools and educate our communities about what is happening. In fact, we were due to be there in October, but obviously that delegation was cancelled because of the current crisis. I, like all of you, I'm sure, just watch in shock and horror every day as events unfold. As has already been said, over 10,500 people have been killed, 2/3 of those are women and children. Nearly 4,500 children have been murdered, and many more lie under rubble who will never be rescued because there is no equipment to rescue them. We are an education union and we cannot stand silent when children are being murdered. I'm very proud of our London educators who yesterday held a vigil to remember those children and to call for further action and to call for an immediate ceasefire, and I know members up and down the country are also going to consider holding vigils to remember the children. Gaza has been under a full electricity blackout for 29 days. I don't know if any of you can imagine what that must be like to have no power when at the same time you're being bombed, you're not able to contact anyone, you're not able to feed your children, you're not able to escape from what is happening. Aid being allowed in is a fraction of what is needed. Drinking water is only enough for 4% of the clean drinking water is only enough for 4% of the residents currently trapped in Gaza. Fuel remains completely banned, and today they've announced several hospitals who are facing imminent closure in Gaza. One of those is the only maternity hospital in the north of Gaza. There's indiscriminate bombing. An Umrah school was hit yesterday, killing people that were sheltering there. You have to challenge when schools and hospitals are hit by bombs. This cannot be something that we can stand aside and remain silent on. 192 medical staff have been killed, 37 journalists, 32 of them from Gaza, and apparently it's the deadliest month since records began in 1992. But it's not just in Gaza that violence has increased, and I think we have to remember those Palestinians living in the West Bank and also in 48. So since the 7th of October, 150 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank, 44 of those are children, and there have been 222 settler attacks against Palestinians. 111 Palestinian households, that's 905 people, including 356 children, have been displaced in Bedouin communities, and a further 135, including 66 children, displaced following demolitions. Due to lack of permits, but permits are impossible to get for Palestinians living in the West Bank. 27 Palestinians and 15 children have also been displaced following punitive demolitions of their properties. So, what has the NEU done? Well, our national president spoke at the very first demonstration and our general secretary spoke at the second. Our members have built for those demonstrations from the initial one, and we will continue to do that. We've ensured our trade union banners and our flags are there, and we've ensured that we've raised our voices loudly. We've issued advice to our members about dealing with the situation in schools. As a union, we're extremely concerned about the Prevent agenda and the way that is being used to try and discriminate against people who are speaking out in support of the Palestinian people. We've called for an immediate ceasefire. We've asked all of our members to contact their politicians and call upon them to do that too. We need immediate humanitarian aid to be allowed in. We've built for the national demonstrations and we will continue to do that. And we will continue to speak out. What is happening now, as has been said, did not begin on October the 7th. Palestinians have suffered decades of illegal occupation, oppression and a lack of rights. And we have a duty to speak out. We have a duty to speak out now, calling for an immediate ceasefire. But when that ceasefire comes, we have a duty to keep speaking out. We have a duty now to say enough is enough. It is time for the Palestinians to have their rights heard and to have their rights achieved. And the final thing I want to say is this, because like many of you, I find what I see every day really distressing. I wake up in the morning, I don't sleep well at all at the moment. I've got lots of friends in Palestine and I have several friends in Gaza. I wake up every morning and the first thing I do is check my phone to look at who's messaged me, to look at what they're telling me, and to read the figures of the latest deaths of people in Palestine. But I won't cry. Because what my Palestinian friends have told me ever since I've been going there is that they don't need our tears, they need our voices because they are voiceless. So our job now is to tell the truth, okay? Because there is a huge attempt to silence us, there will continue to be a huge attempt to silence us. We have to call for justice, we have to call for a ceasefire now, but then justice and freedom for the Palestinians.
Yeah!
Thank you so much, Louise, and good luck next door. Our next speaker I've known for many years from organising against austerity and cuts to our NHS. She's a doctor, and I know how proud she was when she was elected by her local community in Kensington to represent them as a Labour councillor. But a few weeks ago she resigned from that post, or as a Labour councillor at least, partly in disgust at the National Party's position on Gaza and its refusal to support a ceasefire. Well done for taking a stand, and we're really proud to have you. Morning, Kamal.
So yes, I'm among the almost 40 or so councillors who've resigned from the Labour Party. I am aware though that this resignation probably came about 2 years too late. But in the end, it was the Labour leadership's endorsement of war crimes by Israeli forces which made remaining completely inexcusable. Even as Israeli forces were making clear their intention to inflict as much damage as possible on the people of Gaza, Keir Starmer's message was that mass Palestinian suffering was acceptable collateral in Israel's pursuit of self-defence. A week ago, Israeli forces were bombing the Jabalia refugee camp, a war crime. And as they did so, Keir Starmer was standing in Chatham House, still refusing to condemn or even call for an end to the indiscriminate killing of Palestinians. Failure to see Palestinians as human beings with a right to life, failure to oppose war crimes should rule you out as leader of the Labour Party. But actually, Keir Starmer is now being regarded as the right type of leadership material because of his readiness to mindlessly fall into lockstep with his friends in Washington. That isn't leadership. It is morally reprehensible cowardice that is enabling unimaginable atrocities right now, and we must never allow him to forget it. Tony Blair cannot go anywhere without being reminded of his crimes in Iraq, and it must be the same for Starmer's complicity in these crimes. Blatantly clear by now that what we're seeing goes beyond any sane definition of self-defence. Who are you defending yourself against when you're bombing hospitals, mosques, churches, water facilities after you've already cut water, solar panels after you've already cut off fuel? Within 10 days of this bombing, Israeli forces had already killed more children than the total number of Israelis killed by Hamas in the past 10 years. This is not self-defence. What we are seeing is not only an attempt to exterminate the people of Gaza, but the deliberate destruction of the land and infrastructure of one people to make way, to remake that land for another people. And it was confirmed by Netanyahu's statement about Israel taking indefinite security control of Gaza early this week. It is true that the first Nakba never ended, but what we are seeing now is more brutal and possibly more final than what has come before. In 1 month alone, more Palestinians have been internally displaced, albeit within Gaza, than the total number displaced between 1947 to 1949. And the number killed is approaching the figure of 15,000 killed in the first Nakba. And during this unimaginable suffering, the levels of dehumanization Palestinians have been subjected to has known absolutely no boundaries. The greater the cruelty inflicted on them, the greater the need to dehumanize them, so as to minimize opposition for this genocide as it's being live-streamed. They're human animals, they're children of darkness. The parents in Gaza don't love their children as much as they hate Israel. The Palestinian experience has been one of having much of the world deny your humanity, minimize or blame you for your suffering, or just look the other way. And it shames us all that people in Gaza are having to display their dead and mutilated children to beg the West to see them as human. And then, running alongside this, the anti-Arab racism and Islamophobia that has been drummed up here over the past month has been absolutely grotesque, reminiscent of the toxic atmosphere that was cultivated around the war on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's the kind of bigotry which is crucial for engineering assent for atrocities, and that is why it is the accepted racism of our time, not just within the Conservative Party, but also within the Labour Party, if you believe the sort. We can talk about the loss of Muslim or Arab votes, and that has no doubt been impacted, but this is not a Muslim issue or an Arab issue, it's a humanitarian one. It's been said that Palestine is the moral litmus test of the world. It's also the cornerstone of any fight against Western imperialism, whether your focus is anti-racism, against decolonization and the ruthless dispossession of indigenous people, against the military-industrial complex, whether it's women's liberation. Palestine solidarity is the thread that draws all these issues together, and it's where our focus must lie now. This must never mean denying the rights and security of Jewish people in Israel. In fact, having a just solution for the Palestinian people is a precursor for achieving that security. Because where there is repression against Palestinians, there will always be resistance. That is just how human beings work. And after 75 years of trying to crush in the most brutal ways the Palestinians' capacity to resist, they have not been able to. Now, I have at times over the past month felt completely unable to function from the grief and the anger. Like many people, I'm spending all my time ruminating on the relentless images of cruelty that we're seeing. We have all sacrificed a piece of our sanity to bear witness to what is happening. But it's important to acknowledge that, to acknowledge how difficult this has been, but just to park that for now, because there has never been a more crucial time to affirm our commitment to a free Palestine, to boycott all those companies who invest in this terror and profit from Palestinian suffering, to call for an end to all arms sales to Israel and take action, as we heard earlier, against those companies selling the weapons we know are being used to commit these crimes, and to call not just for a ceasefire, but to an end to illegal occupation and the system of apartheid. We must show our government that we will continue to march with Palestinians through this darkness, even as they attempt to marginalise and frighten us into silence. There is only one way to oppose a threatened ban on protesting, as I've heard Lindsey say before, and that is to keep protesting. And for Braverman, I want to finish by saying this: we will not be bullied into silence about an ongoing genocide. And for as long as Israel is engaged in this inhumane violence and persecution of Palestinians, and is subjecting them to a brutal system of apartheid between the river and the sea, then it's our duty to keep our voices raised and to say that from the river to the sea, the people of Palestine will be free.
Yes.
Now we heard from Kate earlier, and we've seen in the last week some powerful practical radical solidarity shown by our trade union members around the world, particularly in Belgium and in Barcelona, and I know that in Melbourne today there are protesters blocking an Israeli shipping company. Our next speaker is from a trade union which is firm in its support of Palestine, which affiliates the Stop the War Coalition and the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and has been leading one of the most important and inspiring workplace disputes in a generation. In fact, his voice is a little bit strained from shouting at the bosses. The Assistant General Secretary of the RMT, Eddie Dempsey.
Yeah. I apologise about the voice, thank you. I know I sound like I've got a touch of the Robert F. Kennedy about me, but I promise some different opinions tonight. So I just want to say thanks very much to the organisers of this really important event, and thank you very much for the speakers who've come out here tonight, all of you very important in different ways. It's amazing to see principled political actors, and you'll find them here, you'll know them by their resignations and their sackings, so thank you for coming out, all of them. And I want to mention also Barnaby and Lowkey. Lowkey in particular, I think, is one of the most important voices of dissent we've got as a class in this country. The persistent work they do, telling the truth in today's culture, is extremely brave, it's important, it's an inspiration to an awful lot of people who don't often have the chance to express what's in their hearts, so thanks to you guys as well. Look, I think the cause of peace and the anti-war movement is, has never been as important as it is today. And I think it's for that reason we're facing attacks in the way that we're facing them in the present moment. The era of the United States of America being the preeminent and unrivaled power on this planet since the fall of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War is over now. We're in a different world. There are different poles of power and shifting alliances, and because of that, the world has never been more dangerous at all. We see as the shifting media attention is now on the current crisis in this long and miserable story of the crisis and the conflict in Israel-Palestine, shifted away from Eastern Europe. Alliances and allies that were made there are now quietly being dropped, and suddenly we're hearing murmurs of peace talks where we were told they would never happen. And this is against the backdrop of the biggest build-up of military power seen in generations in the Mediterranean. There are two massive battle fleets from the United States in the Med right now. The British Navy is over there as part of Group 2, the Southern Battle Fleet and the NATO Response Force. And I've got to say, for the RMT piece is extremely important, and we've often got reasons beyond the rest of the trade union movement in Britain. And those reasons are counted in their thousands. There are members in the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. There are two ships in the Middle East right now, the Argus and the Lion Bay, in which our members are working. These are humanitarian civilian vessels. They're an auxiliary fleet to the Royal Navy, and their primary function is to assist in crisis zones, normally where there's natural disasters, to help civilian populations. They're there in a tinderbox where we could see this conflict and this current round of violence spill over into a much broader conflict when we take into consideration the shifting alliances around the world. So, I've got to say, I've never seen anything to the scale as what we're seeing now in my lifetime in the violence that's being visited on the Palestinian people. And I have to say very frankly, if you take into account what Israeli ministers are saying, what IDF spokespeople are saying, what United Nations rapporteurs and senior people are saying, what human rights lawyers are saying now in their hundreds, when you take all of that into account, alongside the actions that we're seeing, starvation of a population for water and food and fuel, the indiscriminate bombing of a civilian population, the bombings in refugee camps in the West Bank, which has got nothing to do with the events on October the 7th, where we see the escalating violence in the illegal settlements, the rise in evictions. I think we're looking at a genocide unfolding before our eyes, and we cannot be silent in the face of this. We must stand up and be proud. say I think sadly the prospects are bleak. And the reason I say that is because I've been protesting against Israeli crimes against the Palestinian people for as long as I've been able to protest. I said in the other room, I held my son in my arms during Operation Cllr outside the American embassy when the names of murdered Palestinian children were read out. My son took his GCSEs recently. My daughters I took in prams to protest after the march to freedom. After those marches, those peaceful civil disobedient marches were gunned down in hails of gunfire. Then they go to school. And what I fear is if there is any kind of ceasefire, or if there is even humanitarian pauses beyond the 4 hours that we're currently hearing about in the news today, that may act as a pressure valve and may act as a release to get people back off of the streets. And my message here tonight is we cannot allow that to happen again. We have to keep this going. We must keep going, and we must go beyond saying we want to end to the assault on Gaza. We have to say we want to end to the apartheid system in Israel. We must keep going and end to the illegal settlements in the occupied territories. We must keep going until we see an end to the blockade and until we see the establishment of a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. We have to keep going until we see that, and we can't stop. But I will say something else, and that is these marches and the anti-war movement here in Britain and around the world is having an effect. It may not seem like it is, but it is. If you listen to the rhetoric from the politicians when this violence broke out, to the subtle changes we're seeing, that is arising from the pressure from these marches, from the international anti-war movement, from principled politicians like you heard speaking this rostrum a minute ago. That is all bringing pressure to bear on the political process, because none of this is in the United States' interest. The Democratic Party in America, their base, their activist base, is completely up in arms about this. All of the alliances the Americans are going to need to rely on in the Middle East and Africa and around the world are now turning their faces away from the Americans. Anthony Blinken is about as popular in the Middle East right now as a fart in the lift. He's wandering around and he's being insulted wherever he goes. That is important. And he's not just being insulted by people he wants as allies, he's being insulted by Israel. And it's the same of our political class. And so when we hear Keir Starmer and the mealy-mouthed words from Emily Thornberry and David Lammy and the rest of them, Emily Thornberry's my MP, I tell you, she'll never get a vote from me as long as she lives. I saved time on the bureaucratic process of getting myself kicked out. I just didn't join in the first place, so you can't sack me off. So, if you listen to the change in rhetoric that we're hearing, that's coming about through the pressure that we're bringing, and that is why we're being attacked. We're being attacked and we're being portrayed as if we're peddlers of hate and we're the complete opposite. And if you want to know how that's working, I recommend to you the short video that Lowkey did for Double Down News. It's extremely informative. You can see the dark forces that are at play behind this. They're seeking to rally lumpen sections of our society, far-right people. They're trying to portray us as being unpatriotic, as somehow we're spitting on the memories of Britain's war dead by calling for peace. If they've forgotten what armistice means, God above. But we have got to be wary, because they're not going to stop there. This weekend will come and go, and whatever happens will be blamed in this movement for anything that goes wrong. And if they can't stop us then, if they can't get enough public outcry to ban marches, then they'll start attacking us as individuals. And I've got to tell you, the RNT, we know how that feels, we know how this hostile media works, and I haven't paid my TV licence since they had Tony. I forget which massacre it was now. Operation Cllr, Pillar of Defence, they all merge into one another. But I remember the late Tony Benn on the BBC trying his living best to make a very basic plea for humanity and call for aid to Palestinian people who are suffering, and they shut him down. I've never paid my TV licence since then. They'll never get a penny off of me. I'll do charge for them. These are the forces that we have got arrayed against us. But what we've got is each other. And the things that we believe in are too important for us to be put into a state of fear. We've got to keep coming out on the streets, and we have got to keep the pressure up on the politicians. And I have to say, I want to make a call to the broader trade union movement in this country. We have got a historic role as the organised element of the working class to fight for peace and against war. The fight for peace and the fight against war is the fight for working class people, no matter where they are. And we have got to be in the forefront of that. So I say to trade unions right now, who are thinking about the sectional interests they may have in industry, or the hopes that they may be pinning on any future incoming government, they must put that side in the interest of humanity. Because what we're seeing, in my view, is a genocide unfolding. And we must stand up and be candid. And we cannot stop when there's a ceasefire. We have to keep going until the Palestinian people are free.
Movement, and can I also say thanks to the young RMT delegation that are here. You can always rely on your union when needed. I'm sure many of you are members of your trade union, perhaps your reps or involved in your workplaces, but you may not know that the Stop the War Coalition has a trade union network. So if you are not involved and you want to get involved, do speak to us at the end of the meeting and can get involved and find out how to. But we've also, through that trade union network, called for a day of workplace action on this coming Wednesday, the 15th. So whether that be you hold a meeting for your colleagues in your workplace, you do a walkout, you do a visual, whatever it might be, we're encouraging people to take some kind of action to bring this issue to the workplace and to try and build more consciousness and more action. And of course talk to your colleagues about joining the march on Saturday as well, if they're not already. Okay, our next speaker is a leader of the anti-war movement in Britain. She is a founder and currently still convener of Stop the War Coalition, my good friend Lindsey Regan.
Yeah. Comrades, I think we've done something very, very important this week, because everyone has been telling us for weeks that we're not allowed to march. We're not allowed to call for a ceasefire on Armistice Day, even though that should be the most appropriate day to call for a ceasefire. We're not allowed to march even though we weren't going to the Cenotaph. We're not allowed to march because we're hate marchers, which is what we hear from Cllr. But we have defied the government and the police attempts to stop us from marching, and we are marching this Saturday in our hundreds of thousands. And I'm sure that everybody here will be on that march, but we also need to do everything we can in the next 2 days to get as many people there to stand up, not just for the Palestinians, because this has become an issue where Palestine is absolutely at the centre, but it's become a much bigger political issue. It's about free speech, it's about Islamophobia, it's about politicians fomenting fascist and far-right ideas in order to try to crush the Palestine solidarity movement. It's about all those things, so it takes on an extra importance. And if you want any sign of the putrid, rotten government and opposition that we have in this country, there are plenty of things to criticise them for, but surely this disgusting attitude to the bombardment of the Palestinians, the refusal to call for a ceasefire, and a ceasefire is the very minimum that we should be calling for. We should be calling for the end of the apartheid state. We should be calling for justice for the Palestinians. But what we're calling for on this demonstration is a ceasefire, and yet this is too much for the majority of the MPs in the House of Commons, too much for the people in the House of Lords, too much for the Daily Telegraph and the Express and the Mail, who go on about one person who shouts jihad rather than the hundreds of thousands of people who are there in solidarity with the Palestinians. That is the rotten system that we live under. And it's absolutely clear from what people are saying tonight and what we know about this mass movement around the country that we have actually had it up to here, not just with what Israel is doing, but what our government is doing in defence of Israel. I don't want to spend long on Cllr Braverman because I guess she's going to be gone in a few days. That she even is too much for a racist right-wing Tory party. You know, she's in the last few weeks has been sending refugees to Rwanda or trying to send them to Rwanda. She's been saying that if you're living homeless on the streets, that's a lifestyle choice, which was too much even for the landlord party that she's part of. And now, of course, she's described us as racists, as haters, and all these other kind of things. Braverman will go, not mainly because she's put pressure on the Metropolitan Police, and you can only imagine the kind of divisions going on there, that you find the Metropolitan Police going on about the dangers of racism on a demonstration when it's been found institutionally racist more times than we care to... There is an absolute crisis at the top of politics, and one of the things that the social movements and the trade unions and all of us have to do is to look for a way politically where we can get out of this rotten situation that we're now in. You've had Sunak, who is frightened to sack Braverman, he probably has to do it now, but who said when he went to Israel, we hope that you win. We hope you kill the 4,000 children who've died already. We hope that you will destroy Gaza from one end to the other. We hope that we'll continue with this ethnic cleansing. That's what they mean when they say this. And it's also going on, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank, where the settlers and the IDF are working to ethnically cleanse the West Bank as well. This is the second Nakba. It's an attempt to drive the Palestinians out of their historic country, and that's why we have to be on the streets. And we've heard from Keir Starmer as well, who has caused the most, I mean, Mona described it very, very well. There is a huge crisis in the Labour Party, which is not going to go away. It is leading to the resignation of many, many councillors. Shadow Cabinet Minister resigned this week, and other Shadow Cabinet Ministers will resign. But this really isn't good enough. If you have a Labour Party which cannot stand up for human rights, which allows a humanitarian catastrophe to continue, which goes on about democracy but denies the rights of the Palestinians to equality and the right of return and all the other things that they need, then that is something we have to say. That is a Labour Party which is not fit for purpose, and Keir Starmer is not fit for purpose. A huge movement over the last months, not just with the demonstrations, but the demonstrations and the marches have fed off into thousands and thousands of other actions, the occupation of the railway stations, the workers' action last week, the different things that have been going on up and down the country every single day. There are thousands of actions going on as people are standing up for the Palestinians and campaigning for the Palestinians. Do you know, when we set up Stop the War more than 20 years ago, we added two slogans to our original slogan of Stop the War. One was against Islamophobia, and the other was to defend our civil liberties, because we knew that what they would do with the war on terror would be to attack our civil liberties and to attack the Muslim community, who have been absolutely exemplary in standing up against war and standing up in defence of the Palestinian people. And I'm sorry to say that 20 years on, what have we found? More and more repressive laws, more and more Section 13s and Section 14s and Section 12s, stopping you from demonstrating, stopping you going to embassies, stopping you doing all these sorts of things. And the Islamophobia is out of this world. There is a big increase in it again around the question of Gaza, and the whole connection that Braverman makes is that somehow the people on these marches are extremists and terrorists and therefore Muslims, or Muslims in a majority. Those of us who've been on the demonstrations know that is a lie, and know that the Muslims are there as part of a very, very broad movement involving people of all ages, of all races, of all walks of life. That's what's going on. But that is too much for the government to take, because they want to demonise the Muslim community, and we are not going to let that happen. We are going to stand together. Let me say this. Behind what is going on in Gaza, it's not simply about the Israelis. This is about American imperialism and its support for Israel, which it has always had. It arms Israel, it funds Israel, and it backs it politically. And this latest, the 4-hour-a-day ceasefire, that is that Netanyahu's granted, supposedly. So 4 hours when you can be further ethnically cleansed, when you can be further driven from your homes south, and they hope to the Sinai or wherever else they end up, that is something which is backed by the Americans, it's backed by the British, it's backed by the imperialist powers, because Israel acts in their interest. And that normalisation that they tried to bring about with the Abraham Accords, with Saudi Arabia and with all the other Arab states in the region, the truth is that was about keeping the Palestinians down. It was about acceptance of Israel, which says the Palestinians wouldn't get justice and wouldn't get equality and certainly wouldn't get the right to return. So this is why we're demonstrating, and it's a demonstration not just in solidarity with the Palestinians but against what our government is doing. And just the very final point, they don't want a ceasefire. Our demonstration is in favour of a ceasefire. Let's go figure. Is it that they don't want too many people on the streets, or is it that they fear political opposition, which is saying that the ceasefire is the way forward? I believe we have to say this is a political attempt to repress us, it's a political attempt to stop us from marching, it's a political attempt to stop us organising, and we have to fight back organisationally, we have to fight back politically as well. So be on the streets on Saturday, be on the streets every day you can.
Thanks a lot, Lindsey. Be on the streets on Saturday, Lindsey. Who here is going to be on the march?
Yay!
That many, really? We know that it's going to be big. We know that it's probably going to be bigger than the last few weeks. And this takes a lot of organisation. It also takes a lot of support on the day. So if you're able to get there early, if you're able to stick around for the whole day, we do need people to help steward. We're going to need the biggest stewarding team that we've had for a long time. We've got Chris at the back there, who has more experience than anyone else in this country of stewarding big marches, and he's the chief steward. But if you're able to join his big stewarding team, if you can get there at 10 on Saturday, there will be a stewarding meeting at Queen Elizabeth Gate on Hyde Park Corner. So do help us out if you can just help keep things going and keep things in order on the day. It really does make a big difference. Okay, our next speaker has spent his life opposing imperialism. He's a patron of the Stop the War Coalition, writer, journalist, broadcaster, and all-round legend, Tariq Ali.
Hi friends. The atmosphere is very different now to what it was when some of us, Stop the War in the forefront, tried to have a balanced position on the Ukraine war, saying we support Ukrainian right to national self-determination against Putin, but we oppose NATO's provocative actions against Russia for the last 12 years, if not more, which have finally brought this situation to a war. And people were told, don't sit with these people on the platform. Labour MPs kept running away, please take my name off. It was not good training for you, guys and gals of the Labour Party socialist campaign group, that you capitulated so easily, because now you've had to come out again, and you can't prevent yourself from coming out because your constituents are angry. I have a confession to make. Yesterday I was rung up by, as were many Stop the War comrades, to give my views to the Times of London radio station. Since the BBC never asks me, I said to myself, why not? So I went along, and she was an ex-BBC woman who had interviewed me before. And before I went on, they showed me, thankfully, Suella Braverman's op-ed piece, which was going into the paper tomorrow. So having read that, I was in a total rage. So when she said, it was actually quite a balanced interview, and I gave why we were marching, etc., etc. But then she said, the Home Secretary calls this a hate march. Is it? I said, yes, we all hate her. Trying to build a new party or get the leadership, why don't she get out of the cabinet, stop talking rubbish and do what she has to do? We're not going to listen to her. Nobody I know, including half her own party, has any respect for her, and that's the only way to deal with these. Now I want to start with giving you a few facts and figures which I myself forget, so I can't blame too many other people for doing so. Because the conflict between Palestine and the United States backing Israel, US-Israel, has been going on for so long now that we tend to forget. So for some it's, and you know, that's fine, that's how it happens. And for some it's all started on October the 7th with Hamas's atrocity, as they call it. You know, it's not something I would support, but in the middle of a liberation war that has been going on now for nearly 3 decades, it's a bit difficult for us sitting here to give concrete advice on tactics. The strategy is clear. They want some form of independence or equality. Every time the Palestinians have tried non-violence, it has failed. When we tried to set up the BDS, boycott, sanctions, divestment, it was going so well that they had to stop it. So they made it illegal in parts of the states, and this wretched government has made it illegal in this country for councils or whoever under government control cannot participate in the boycott, divestment and sanctions because it was getting very successful. So you try. I backed that. I was one of the signers of the original declaration when Mustafa Barghouti sent it to me and to many others. We said, thank God there's a way of protesting that doesn't involve violence. Let's do it. They won't let us do that. That's unacceptable. You're anti-Semitic. And we know the campaign against Corbyn, which resulted. All that is now, as the comrade from the RMT was saying, has changed a bit. There's been a huge shift. And why? Because the resistance has resumed. Not in a way everyone would like, but it has resumed. And that's what it is. A resistance to try and fight for their rights. I have to be honest with you, I was getting incredibly depressed for the last few years. I said, are they going to get away with it? Is no one going to do anything? Is nothing going to ever happen? So that Netanyahu goes into the United Nations, holds up a map of Israel, which shows Gaza and the West Bank under Israeli control, and he says, this is Israel. I really was hoping something would happen. I didn't know, obviously, this is what it would be. But why did this happen on this particular day? Because it's the 50th anniversary of the 1973 war. That is why they did it. They have a historical memory. And in that war, and this is another thing, the lies that Braverman and Starmer and all these people are saying, this is the biggest killing of Jews since the Holocaust. Total nonsense. Complete and utter lie. In the 1973 war, there were 2,656 Israeli soldiers killed. 18,000 Egyptians and Syrians died. So the proportion is roughly the same as it is now at this very moment. This is modern. Who are these civil servants who write their bloody speeches? They should do their homework or be fired. So, the other point, which I think is very important to stress, is that as early as 1967, after the Six-Day War, which the Israelis won and which led to the occupation, one disaster after the other, an advertisement appeared in the Hebrew paper, Haaretz, the liberal paper in Israel, much, much better than the New York Times or the Guardian, because they actually have 2 or 3 reporters who tell the truth and who follow the situation. And an advertisement was put in by lots of left-wing Jewish people and Arab Palestinians together, but the Jewish intellectuals were in a majority. And this is what they said. This is what the ad said on the 22nd of September 1967. Occupation entails foreign rule. Foreign rule entails resistance. Resistance entails Israeli repression. Repression entails terror and counter-terror. Holding on to the occupied territories will turn us into a nation of murderers and victims of murder. This is in 1967. How accurate this act was. And then those who talk about the Palestinians, Hamas in particular, but the Palestinians, Muslims in general, who have no problems about killing children, etc. It sort of makes me so angry when I read this, especially coming from the Western world, who in 3 minutes flat destroyed 2 Japanese cities at the conclusion of the Second World War, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with thousands and thousands of children, women, men dead, and suffering for years afterwards. They did that. And then they have the nerve to talk about Islam. And let me tell you, remind those of you who may have forgotten, during the sanctions against Iraq, long time ago now, just to talk about children, Madeleine Albright was appearing. She was the Secretary of State of Bill Clinton. She was appearing in an interview for CBS 60 Minutes, primetime show on mainstream US television. And the interviewer, Leslie Stahl, said to her, the tragic effect of US sanctions on Iraq has been that, I quote now directly, we have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that is more children than died in Hiroshima, asked Stahl. And you know, is the price worth it, Madam Albright? Albright's answer has inspired the current US response to Israel's willful slaughter of Palestinian children in Gaza. I think it's a very hard choice, Albright replied, but the price, we think, the price is worth it. That's how American imperialists think. They control the world. They run the world. If they wanted to, they could order a halt to this. 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, they could have stopped the siege. They could stop it tomorrow. They did so before. They did so in 1957 when Israel occupied the Gaza Strip for the first time, and Eisenhower called the Israeli Prime Minister and he said, I want you out of Gaza. Out of Gaza. And the Israelis prevaricated, and Eisenhower said, if you don't get out of Gaza, we will impose sanctions on you. He was the President of the United States. Now, some people say that things have changed. Of course they've changed. It's not just the Israel lobby, because however powerful that lobby is, the tail doesn't wag the dog. Just give me 2 minutes and then I'll finish. Stop showing
Yes! We're next door as well.
I'll finish, I promise. But then they said, and all the evidence is there, the amount of money given by the Israeli lobby to Democrats and Republicans alike, huge amounts, that can't do it on its own. The real reason is that the American empire now genuinely believes that it can't trust its Arab allies because the citizens of these large Arab countries, you may have pocketed their governments, are Arab people after all, and who knows, one day they might get out of control. So stick on to Israel for as long as we can. That is why they hang on to Israel. I remember I was once speaking at a big rally outside the White House during the Iraq War period, and there's a huge crowd, including large numbers of Orthodox Jews, carrying banners saying, Sharon, Palestinian blood is not water, and all this. And I spoke, and people were shouting slogans against Israel, and I said, look, the lobby is a huge problem. I see in front of me tens of thousands of Arab people, young and old. Surely there are a few Arab billionaires around. Couldn't you buy 10 or 15 senators? Yeah. I said, just buy them. And when you need them, they'll ask questions in the Senate, and at least you'll have someone to defend. The people, I said, by the way, afterwards they came and said, were you serious? I said, yeah, I was serious. So this is the situation that we confront. It's going to be a long haul. They might, as others have said, have a 3-day ceasefire in order to get the so-called, the hostages released. And I hope that the Palestinians will demand the release of all our hostages from the West Bank and from Gaza. All the people who've been imprisoned. And one very last point, which is this, and this is a long-term point. I think there's something wrong in the way in which the Judeo side of the Second World War and the Holocaust is how people are being educated. It's very out of balance. It's almost as if there was one horrific catastrophe. Forget, there's a much larger catastrophe in the last century, which was the wiping out of 10 to 12 million Congolese Africans by Belgium. Pretty horrific. No one ever mentions that or talks about it because it's not the dumb thing. So the Holocaust should be taught as something that shouldn't happen again, and it should be that whoever does it, whoever carries out genocide, must learn those lessons and the lessons of Nuremberg. Okay, folks, see you on Saturday. Give me notes.
I don't know if we've got any school kids in the room. I suspect we probably don't have too many. I've seen at least one. But you may have tomorrow, and hopefully we can make that really big. But it's sort of relevant to introduce our next speaker, who's a good friend of mine, who I met through campaigning in support of the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement as students at university. But he was radicalised at a much younger age and was involved in the school students against the war when he was at school. You may have seen him on TV going head-to-head this week with Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce academic and activist Barnaby Raine.
Cheers, Shelley. I want to start with two tributes. One of them I made in the other room. Since Eddie's on the platform, I want to start with two tributes. First, a tribute to the heroes of the RMT.
Hey.
It's relevant because the RMT say, like the Palestinian people and like so many other people all over the world, that human beings should live and work in dignity and should not be treated like dirt. The RMT are here with us today, and let us pledge that we will be with them on their picket lines in future. Secondly, I want to pay tribute, others may have done it already, I've been in the other room, but I want to pay tribute to the Stop the War Coalition. Rarely has a political movement been so maligned by the mainstream, and never, as far as I can think, never has an organised political movement been proved more consistently right in every single prediction that it made, in every single warning that it delivered. Rarely so maligned, never so right. Comrades, I think these two facts might be connected. I want to start with some words from a great Jewish hero of mine, Walter Benjamin, who said, and these words have been on my mind so much in the horror of the last few weeks, that even the dead will not be safe from the enemy if he wins. Israel talks, when people die, about terrorists. We're killing terrorists, they say. And I think of the baby boy pulled from the rubble, where his parents spent years building a home that was destroyed in an instant. Terrorists. Even the dead will not be safe from the enemy if he wins. Okay, the Israelis say, they're not all terrorists, but some of them are human shields. And I think of the elderly grandparents who flee the homes they built with their families for decades onto a motorway because Israel tells them to flee that way to save their lives, and then Israel bombs the route they're fleeing on. Human shields. Even the dead will not be safe from the enemy if he wins. Or it gets worse. Terrorists, human shields, then some of the dead just don't exist. Hamas figures. I think of the people under constant bombardment, the workers at the Gaza Health Ministry compiling every single name to try to say to the world, this is what's being done to us. This is how we're being killed. Please pay attention. Terrorists, human shields. We can't even trust the figures. They didn't live. They didn't die. Even the dead will not be safe from the enemy if he wins. We march and organise for the living. We march and organise because we have to check every few minutes what the death toll is, because it climbs and climbs, and we watch in real time on our TV screens as more and more children die, and we just want it to stop. They call us hateful for it. We march for the living so that they may continue to live, so that the killing can stop, not for an hour of a humanitarian cause, but stop for good. And we march too for the dead, so that they may one day be remembered as the martyrs of a free people, and not as terrorists or human shields, or people who never really lived or died at all. Even the dead will not be safe from the enemy if he wins, and Benjamin says this enemy has not ceased to be victorious. You know, I've met many people in recent weeks. It's been an extraordinary few weeks of carnage and horror, but also of hope. I've met many people who have not been political in the past, but who have come to this movement that is emerging, because they have learned now what the rules-based international order means. They've learned now what the liberal internationalism of American-friendly supervision means. They're learning that it means the kind of constant barbarism that says to many people in this room, this is what we think of your children too. Poorer people and darker people, this is what we think of your children too. Their lives don't matter, their deaths don't matter. People are learning that now. And so people come to politics through that humanitarian impulse, which sees horror and is horrified. Nothing human, Marx said, is alien to me. But the space between humanitarianism and politics is the space of explanation and analysis, the space that asks, why? Why this carnage? Why this brutality? Why target journalists? Why target UN workers? The UN says people in an emergency need at least 15 litres of water a day for drinking and washing, and all our requirements in Gaza, they get less than 3 litres. Why? Diarrhea spreads now and cholera spreads. Why create an artificial humanitarian crisis? Why bomb people with white phosphorus? Something they can't deny because we can see it. Why bomb people with a weapon? What military function is served by a weapon whose chief quality is that it burns the skin to a crisp, burns it off the flesh? Why? We are witnessing the punishment of Gaza, and it is a punishment known to people all over the world, from Ireland to Algeria, from the Americas to Vietnam, punished for one thing above all, that they refuse to disappear. Palestine has been punished since before 1948, because its people are marked out for dispossession, just as millions have been marked all over the world, so that others may live in peace and safety. Palestinians are pummeled so that the colonial state, which sits atop their stolen, broken homes, may sit there in comfort and safety. And so it is no small wonder that the same politicians and leaders everywhere who seek to strip poorer and darker people of dignity by cutting their benefits or exploiting their labour, by starving their schools and hospitals and council homes of funds so that the money may flow to champagne at the top, it's no small wonder that those same leaders see something to recognise and support in the Israeli state. Wasn't British capitalism also born in the dispossession of its peasants and the kidnapping of people overseas for free labour? So the great irony of all that talk of Israel as a Jewish state is that it represents only the tragic move of many Jews. I see it, I grew up with many people who feel this, who after centuries of endless brutalisation by Western civilization said, if we can't beat them, join them. Israel is an exemplar not of any Jewish values, but of the violence that has for so long ruled the West. It is just about the most Gentile thing I can think of. The language that Israel now uses, I don't mean all Gentiles, some Gentiles are fine. Just not the ones with a lot of power in Western countries. The language Israel now uses, human animals. Where did they learn that language? They didn't take it from our great religious traditions. Human animals. They took it from the European colonialists who went to Africa and the Americas and Asia and brutalized and massacred people. Human animals. And where did they learn it? Those European colonialists. They didn't invent it when they went to Africa and Asia and the Americas and massacred people. They honed it for 2,000 years against my people, who killed God, so had to be excluded and exiled and massacred. That's why we must take no lessons from anyone who supports Israeli carnage about anti-Semitism. We stand in the tradition of those who fought racism and fascism. We stand in the tradition of those who refuse to bow before Nazism and the Holocaust when we say people should not be called human animals and marked out for dispossession and massacres. Everyone everywhere should have the right to live in peace and freedom, and we make no apologies to anyone for saying it. When they talk of people killed in Israel and say it's a pogrom, it's an insult to my family members, murdered for centuries by European civilization in pogroms, who were not colonial settlers who didn't steal anyone else's land. It's an insult when they say Palestinians are like the Nazis of the Holocaust because they want to live. They don't care about the religion of their colonizer. They just want to live in peace and freedom, compared to the Nazis of the Holocaust. And by whom? By the European civilization which for centuries honed and pioneered anti-Semitism, and now by German politicians who demand loyalty oaths of Arabs, it's exactly the same tradition they meted out to us as Jews. We won't stand for it. We stand in the anti-fascist tradition. So they call us hate marchers. Listen to that when they call us hate marchers. They see a constituency that they have always feared and loathed. The multiracial working class city. People struggling in shit jobs, struggling with high rents, wondering whether to have kids as climate catastrophe looms. They see people wondering if their lives can be anything other than precarity and abuse. They see people suddenly inspired by the colours of the Palestinian flag, which now appears all over London, and the police try to take it down, and so people paint it onto walls. Why? Why are people inspired by the colours of the Palestinian flag? Because it represents a certain defiance. When even against all the odds, when everything seems stacked against you, you refuse to surrender. These are truly global dividing lines. Colonial power soothes itself with stories of its enlightened, civilized superiority over the colonized. We say ceasefire, so they hear jihad. We say intifada, so they hear ethnic cleansing. Colonial power always works with this logic of projection. They blame others for what they do themselves. That's why they call others savages and barbarians. Because the one possibility they cannot really face is that the people they have dispossessed, this is the thing that really scares them, the thought that the people they have dispossessed are not apes, but thinking, feeling human beings who carry with them the noblest, the most beautiful idea known to humanity, freedom. A world where nobody lives in anybody else's stolen home. A world where all our resources are shared so that nobody is kept from food and shelter at gunpoint. Anywhere, all over the world, those who drown in the Mediterranean trying to reach safety, they know this hope. They class the Palestinian flag as a hope of freedom, too. We who march for Palestine hold that hope of a world where our resources are shared and our lives are lived in dignity. We clasp that hope. We refuse to surrender it, even in a sea of cynicism, even in a sea of violence. And now, when others tell us to give up and give in, we know what we'll say. We have no right to surrender the hope of a better, a freer, a more dignified world for all. What right could we have if after 70 years of ongoing Nakba, the Palestinian people have refused to surrender? So I finish on this. Ours is not a movement of charitable concern. There's a word people in my generation use sometimes, I don't like very much, allyship. As if we're separate from others and we're just supporting them. This is not a movement of charitable concern. This is a global movement of solidarity, where we link arms and learn from one another across borders. Millions marching from Indonesia to Washington, D.C. A global movement where we refuse all of their miserable capitalist and imperialist logic of alienation and mutual isolation, separation across borders. And we say, in struggling for freedom, this is what I'm going to be thinking on Saturday. And I'm going to think it whatever the British government says, and I'm going to think it when I come out to march and organise, even if they ban us. I'm going to be there with the Palestinian flag, not out of charitable concern because people are dying, but out of hope, taking courage from the confidence and the perseverance, the steadfastness of the Palestinian people. We say when we march, we are walking like a Palestinian. We are singing and dancing and standing tall like a Palestinian. So that one day, they think from the river to the sea is bad. Well, listen to this. One day, from every ocean to every sea, everyone, everywhere will be free.
Barnaby, or maybe our headline act.
Yay!
Someone who's inspired many, I think, particularly young people, to take action. And Eddie said this earlier, with particular clarity through his writing, his speaking, and of course his music, to better understand the role of Israel and its allies in perpetuating imperialism across the world. He is a rapper, an activist, a friend, and a patron of the Stop the War Coalition. Lowkey!
Thank you so much for that. Well, what has been demonstrated across the last week is that they are attempting to fold Palestine into the cultures wars. And what we know is that the culture wars are to distract from the class war. It's the same people that have ranted and raved about cancel culture in the media class that are now telling you Israel's right to defend itself includes the bombing of hospitals, schools, churches and mosques, and driving 2 million Palestinians out of Gaza into the Sinai desert. The real cancel culture in this country is the thousands of workers who were spied on and blacklisted in this country. The real cancel culture is children referred to prevent because they mentioned the word Palestine or Syria in class. The real cancel culture is people dying in the English Channel trying to get into this country. And yes, the real cancel culture is the millions of Palestinians rendered refugees, not only in their own land, but outside of it. So you see, the same people, the very same people that told you lies about the RMT are the very same people that told you lies about WMD.
Yeah.
Now, the very same people that told you lies about WMD are the same people that tell you lies about refugees.
Yeah.
And the very same people that tell you lies about refugees are the very same people telling you lies about the Palestinians now.
Yes.
Now, Suella Braverman... Suella Braverman, in the last year, gave an interview where she said the following sentence: I have several close family members serving in the IDF. Now let me ask you a question. When faced with the situation that we're talking about, where every single manner of war crime has been committed upon the Palestinian people in the last month, and constantly it has been a constant status quo of cruelty on an industrial scale against the Palestinians. How can we say that Suella Braverman does not have a conflict of interest when pontificating about marches in solidarity with the people that she has said she has family members currently killing? But what about Rishi Sunak? Well, Rishi Sunak has a family business that his father-in-law founded, that his wife still has £500 million worth of shares in, by the name of Infosys. It works on collecting biometric data, it works on surveillance of people.
Yeah.
Infosys signed a memorandum of understanding with Israel in 2012 to deepen cooperation between it as a company and between Israel as a political entity. What you saw after that were many Israeli subsidiaries of Infosys pop up, and today you have 200 employees of Infosys in the political unit of Israel. But what else did you have until fairly recently? One of the directors of Infosys was a gentleman by the name of Yuri Levine. Now this was a former member of Unit 8200. This is Israel's signals intelligence unit in the military intelligence. This organization has been found by 42 whistleblowers from within it to spy and surveil Palestinians and use that information to blackmail them. To me, these things look like conflicts of interest. And when we think about the 10,000 plus that have died being killed under Israeli bombs in Gaza, what we also have to remember is that during this month, how many more have died from dehydration? When hospitals stop functioning, what happens to babies in incubators? When hospitals stop functioning, what happens to people who need dialysis? When hospitals stop functioning, what do you think happens to pregnant women? Those of us, those of this society who have harangued many of us from the Middle East on the issue of women's rights have had nothing to say, not a word to say about the thousands of women. You have heroes of humanity right now in hospitals in Gaza delivering babies through C-sections without anaesthetic. Where is the rights of those people? Where are the rights of those people? How do we look at someone like Hassan Abu Sitta, Palestinian doctor from London with British citizenship, who is working around the clock to save lives in Gaza, and what happened? His family got a visit from counter-terror police. Why? Because he's speaking out and saving lives in Palestine. It's almost as if they don't want lives saved in Gaza. How can we look at someone like Wa'il Dahdour? This is the peak of humanity. A human being whose entire family were killed in an Israeli airstrike, and yet he still puts his helmet on, puts his jacket on, and goes back to work to try and document what this fascism is doing to his people. And let me tell you something. Israel has the population registry for Gaza. Every single journalist that enters Gaza has to give the information about where their family live to the Israeli authorities. 39 journalists. There are journalists saying today, I wish I never gave that information to the Israeli authorities because they killed my family and they most likely targeted them. We are now in a period of time where the international community, the concept of what the international community is being redefined. Don't get it wrong. Israel has maximalist, fantastical aims. If you read the writings of Zionist thinkers throughout the last 100 years, this is not about self-defense, and this is not about any of the Palestinian political groups. This is about the expansion of Israel. This is about an attempt to push the Palestinians into the Sinai in a greater population displacement than the Nakba was. What will we say to our grandchildren if they ask us what we did at this time? What did we do to stop this? And you know, they tell us that the US, Britain, the EU, Japan, that's the international community. That's what they say to us. They don't believe in a ceasefire. Well, let me say to you very clearly, the majority of humanity are represented by governments that not only want a ceasefire, but also represented by governments that do not define Palestinian resistance, armed resistance, as terrorism. The governments that I just named to you do, and they represent less than 1 billion people in the world. Let me tell you the governments that don't define Palestinian armed resistance as terrorism. Who's more neutral than Switzerland? The Swiss government represents around 10 million people. It doesn't define those organizations as terrorists. The Turkish government, hundreds of millions of people, doesn't define those organizations in that way. The Chinese government, 1.4 billion people, it does not define those organizations in that way. Why? Why? Because a majority of countries in the world understand themselves as post-colonial subjects. Decolonization is undoubtedly, in the eyes of the vast majority of humanity, a positive process. But not to those who believe that Palestinians have to be subjugated indefinitely by Israel. Under the UN Resolution 3246, the Palestinians have the right to armed resistance. Do not be scared by what they're saying on the news. Merely stating those facts does not take you outside the realms of legality in this country. And feel free to assert that wherever you want. Not Suella Braverman, not Piers Morgan, not Rishi Sunak. None of them can take those words out of my mouth, and they shouldn't be able to take them out of yours either. And let me tell you something. Israel perceives assertions as signs of strength. But what has been proven time and time again is what it sees as signs of strength are actually vulnerabilities. Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms company, used to have 10 factories in this country. It doesn't anymore. It only has 8. And you know why? Because those factories have been the subject of hundreds of direct action operations across the last 3 years. Elbit Systems' headquarters office in London was shut down and permanently vacated. Elbit Systems had a subsidiary in Oldham, Ferranti Technologies, that it had to sell. You know why? Because Palestine Action repeatedly targeted them and shut them down, working with the local community. This needs to be a never again moment. We will not go back. We will shut down your factories. They are not strength, they are vulnerabilities. Now, the last point I want to make is we have several major unions in this country that around 10 years ago passed motions for BDS unanimously, but yet they have not been implemented. Now is the time, if you are a member of any of those unions, to agitate for that to happen. BDS now. If not now, then when? And you know, they tell us that resistance is futile, but what we say to them is resistance is fertile. And we will continue to plant seeds for trees that we might not sit in the shade of, but plant them we will. Long live Palestine, long live Palestine.
It's been really fantastic, lots of contributions tonight, really inspiring, powerful, and giving us the real energy that we need, we don't necessarily need, but to take with us on the streets on Saturday. Are you all going to be there? Yeah! Okay, bring your flags, bring your friends, bring your energy. Let's make it as big as we possibly can. And just another plug, if you can get there early at 10 in the morning, Queen Elizabeth Gate to help steward, please come. The good people who are on the NEU payroll and working overtime to keep us open have to get home. So we do have to close the meeting now, I'm afraid. But again, thank you very much for coming along. Please donate on the way out because marches cost money. And if you haven't joined Stop the War yet, please do. And please affiliate your trade union branch. Good night, everyone.
Be out of here by 10 minutes ago, so if we could... He's still live.